welcome to our channel. In the last session, we discussed Flexbox layout. So this Flexbox layout is used for arranging the elements in one dimension, whether it is a row or column. Suppose if you want to place the elements in two dimension, we are moving into grid layout. So generally, this grid layout is used for creating complex layouts. Okay. Now, coming to whether flex layout or grid layout, what is the main important property? Display property. So, display flex. Automatically, the container becomes a flex container. Similarly, if you write display grid, the container becomes a grid container. In grid, another variation is also there, that is inline grid. So remember the first property, display. Now, what is the next most important thing? Here the elements are placed in rows and columns. That means you need to know either the number of rows or number of columns. Okay. Now for that, the name of the property is grid template column. So this property specifies the number of columns that the grid layout consists of. Along with, if you want, you can give the width of each column. For example, this is a grid. If you want three columns, so column 1, column 2. This is column 1, column 2, column 3. We are writing the number of columns with the width. So how many number of columns you require? All those are separated with space. See the syntax? Grid template column, none, auto, none in the sense nothing, auto in the sense according to the border, that is layout that is created, it takes the exact measurement. For example, this is the layout. I want three columns equally divided into three columns. Suppose if this is the layout, this layout is equally divided. Now, the maximum content, simply the maximum content of a column, the minimum content, the length, initial inheritance. Anyway, while we move on, we will understand. The most important thing is auto, or else whatever the length you want, you can give. See this one, grid template columns 1, 2, 3, 4. Meaning is 4 columns are created in the grid. This is the size, that is the width of column 1. This is the width of column 2, width of column 3, column 4. In the similar fashion, you can use grid template rows as usual. The number of rows along with width of each row. Along with width of each row. Now, I will explain one example related to this display and grid template. Step by step, we will move on. Consider one basic HTML. Now, okay, I will type. First, here what you are doing, coming to head. Within the head, I am using style tag. Within the head, I am using style tag. Now, what you are doing under style tag, take any selector, container. Suppose here I am using dot, so I am using class selector. So the name is your wish, but just for understanding, I used that name container. First, what is the first property? Display grid. This is the first thing. Now, automatically, whatever the item or tag that uses container, that is a grid container. Clear? Same CSS styles only, grid container. Now, how many number of columns you want? Sir, I want 3 columns. Whatever you want, you can write directly auto. Or else you can write suppose 20 pixel, or like this, you can give the width also. But here, what in my first example, I am using 3 autos, means 3 columns are created. Just for your understanding, I am using some background color also. Suppose background color, some yellow color. Okay, whatever it is, yellow, green. So background color is also there. Padding, you know the meaning of padding. So I given padding. These are the properties of one container. Now, this layout is created. Exactly, yes. once layout is created, within the layout, you are placing the items. So here what I am doing, for each and every item, I will write down some properties, whatever you want. Suppose the background color of each item I given as red. Now, for each and every item, if you want border, 1 pixel, that is the width of the border. Now, the border is solid shape and the color of the border. You already know the border properties. Now, padding. So all these things are already completed. Border, background, so padding, font sizes, everything is completed. Suppose I given some font size is equal to 30 pixel. If you want, you can use the text align at the center. Remember, these are not fixed. According to your requirement, you can place anything now. So these are the properties of layout. These are the properties of items that are placed under the layout. Now coming to the body. So I will write down first one message. The message is, this is grid. Just I will display one message. Now H1 no property is applied. Container property is not applied. Item property is also not applied. Now take one div class. Take one div tag. Class is equal to, what is the name I given? Container. Class is equal to container. Within this one, now one container is created. Within this one, I am placing the item. Suppose div class is equal to item. Automatically for this item properties are applied. So one is my value. One is my value. Now copy this one. Like this, place some set of items. How many you want, you can place. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I am placing 9. For remember, count is not at all important. 9. Then you are given 3 columns, 9 elements. Automatically, it will take 3 rows. Suppose if you are given 10 elements, automatically it is converted into 4 rows. So column number is 3 only. The column number is 3 only. Now save this one. Coming to here, copy the path. Execute. Now observe, one container is created. Understand carefully what I given. So by considering this example, move back. Container. So the container is grid container. Observe, it looks like a grid. Now 3 columns, auto, auto, auto. The 3 columns are auto. See, observe the equal width. Observe the equal width. The background color of the container, yellow, green. Observe in the background, yellow, green. Padding. So this border to this one, the padding is 10 pixel. Now each and every item background color is red. Border for each and every item, the border is 1 pixel solid. Whatever the properties I given, exactly the items are placed. Now clear with display property and template column. I think these two clear. Now, along with, instead of grid template columns, if you want, you can use grid template rows. Anyway, just to for your understanding, I will change. Suppose instead of auto, see 200 pixel. Save. Observe, this is the previous one. Now I am refreshing. Think you got it? So this is column 3. 200 pixel is allotted. The remaining space is allocated to 2 columns. Like this, you can take default width of the column, or whatever the column width you want, you can take that one. This is my first property, grid template column. Move to another one. So we can adjust the gap size. What is mean by this gap size? The gap size in the sense, this one. Observe here, from 1 to 2, in between some line is there. This is column gap. Here this one is there. This is row gap. Now you got it? You can adjust the size of the column or size of the gaps. That is gaps between the column. What is the property? Column gap. So means for each and every column, it gives a gap of 50 pixel. Row gap. For each and every row, it gives 50 pixel. Or else you can use shorthand notation instead of remembering these two. Now, what is the meaning if you are given two values? This is row gap. This is column gap. If you give only one value in the sense, that value is applied to both rows and columns. Now, I will show you practically. Just for understanding, I used auto. I used auto. Now, first I given column gap only. Suppose give column gap some 50 pixel. Now refresh. I think you observe the gap between each and every column. Similarly, if you want, you can give row gap also. Suppose here I am given the row gap is equal to 50 pixel. Refresh. Observe, this is row gap. This is row gap. Right, clear? Now, sir, I doesn't want this column gap and row gap. Directly, you are using the shorthand notation gap. So, 50 pixel space 60 pixel. The meaning is the first to 50 pixel belongs to row. Next to 60 pixel belongs to column. Refresh. Changed or not? This is the next two property. Clear? Two things are completed. One is how to create the number of columns and rows. The next one is how to provide a gap between the rows and columns. Now we are moving to the next property, grid lines. What is it mean by grid layout? For example, here this is the grid that we are created. This consists of 3 rows and 3 columns. In this is line 1. That is column line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. Similarly, row line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. So 3 rows in the sense we have 4 lines, so 3 columns in the sense of 4 columns, 4 lines. Now, here what is the properties? The next two properties are grid row start. That is from which row line the item will start. Now, grid row end. That means on which row line the item will end. Similarly, grid column start. Simply, on which column the item will be started. Grid column end. On which column the item will be ended. That means how many number of columns the item will span. Okay. Now, first grid row start. Auto means by default. By default starting from the first row. Or else you can give the row line number also. Similarly, grid row end. Auto means by default end at the last position, or we can give the line number, that is on which line the item will end, or you can give span n means how many number of rows the item will span. Now, we will consider one example. Same container is there, item is there. Along with, I will write down one more selector. So, which item uses this selector? That property is applied to that one. So, what is my first one? Grid row start. Suppose I am starting from row 2. I have 4 columns. I am starting from row 2. Assume I have a total of 6 elements. Now, suppose if item 1 wants to, that is this one wants to start at row 2. Simply use that property also. Save, copy the path. Previously removed. Again copy. Now observe in which row item start. The item started row number 2. Clear? The item started row number 2. Now coming to the next property. Grid row end. On which row the item will end. Suppose 3. The item will end on row 3. So my example consists of only 2 rows. That is the reason what I am doing. I am reducing the number of rows, number of columns. If you reduce the number of columns in the sense, automatically the number of rows are increased. Now, row n, same item, item 1, save, refresh, observe. Suppose if you place another item, place only 6 items means these are filled. Place another one, div class is equal to item 7. Now check the output. Now check the output. On end at where it is ended? End at row number 3. The grid row end on row number. Row number in the sense row line number 3. This is first line, second line, third line. End at row line 3. Or else you can write like this also. Span. Suppose 2. See, spanning, that is how many number of rows that the item want to span. Here I given 2. So 2 rows. I think you got it. This is grid row property. Exactly. We are using grid column property also. Grid column start. So from which column you want to start? Suppose you am starting from column number 2. Suppose start at column number 2. Refresh. Observe. So I have total 7 items, 3 columns. I am starting from column number 2. Clear? Similarly, grid row column end. Grid column end. Span 3. So what is the meaning of span 3? 3 columns. Spanning of 3 columns. Observe, the 3 columns are spanned. The 3 columns are spanned. Suppose if I given 2, this item will span in 2 columns. See, item will span in 2 columns. Now we clear the property. This is grid row start, row end, column start and column end. We have shorthand notation also. Grid row. Simply it specifies the starting and ending. So grid row start slash grid row end. Row slash grid row end. That means if I write like this, grid row colon 1 means starting at row 1 slash. Suppose if I written span 2 means starting at row 1 and it spans for 2 rows. Now I will change this example. Grid instead of start and row, directly 1 slash 2. See, starting at row 1, it spans for 2 rows. It spans for 2 rows. Similarly, you can use grid column property. Starting at row 1, starting at column number 1, it spans for 2 columns. It spans for 2 columns. Clear? This is a grid row and grid column property. Right?